Okay, yeah, so here we are. We are live on broadcasting. Okay, yeah, so I'll start us off. I'm Michael. I'm a second year ETA. I teach at an elementary school in Jinju, and I'm from Rhode Island.
Who are you handing off to? Who's next?
I'll go next. My name is Nikki Brueggemann. I am a second year ETA in Jeongju. You're a West Coast alumni, right?
Yeah.
You are. So you probably received my emails for the West Coast. That was me.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
the email fiasco. But yeah, anyway.
Nice to meet you.
I can go next. I'm Talia. I'm a first year ETA in Cheongju, and I'm originally from State College, Pennsylvania. Nice to meet everyone.
Nice to meet you.
Okay, I can go next. Can everyone hear me? No?
Yeah.
You're all good.
Okay, cool. So my name is Brittany Galloway. I am a first year ETA in the Gangwon-do province, and I am in a small village right next to Hwacheon. The name of the village is Yucheon, and I teach at an elementary school.
Great. Great. I'll go and then I'll hand it off to you, Esther. So my name is Karl. I spent a year in Korea from 2014 to 2015, and I was also in Gangwon. Or no, I wasn't in Gangwon-do. I was in Gyeongbuk province, northern Gyeongbuk province. God, it's been a while. I was in Uisan. I don't know if anyone's still there. It's a little garlic town near Andong. But yeah, I finished up and went out to San Francisco, and I'm actually talking to you guys from New York. I moved here over the weekend, so a lot to talk about today. I'm really excited. So Michael, thanks for reaching out. Esther, do you want to kick us off?
Sure thing. Hi, everyone. I'm Esther. I am a Fulbright research grantee from 2008 to 2009. I was studying traditional dance research in Seoul. And I moved out to California about a year ago. I said I would never leave New York City, and it's funny how it's funny how things work out. So Karl, you and I just did a swap.
Yeah, that's so funny. I have no idea.
Nice.
And Michael, thank you so much for bringing us together, and thanks so much for joining. And I'll let you take it from here.
Yeah, thank you, Esther and Karl, for joining. It should be a good conversation here, and I'm sure you guys will provide some great answers to these questions. So we'll just jump right into it. So it's about life and career after Fulbright on the West Coast. I know Karl's just moved to New York City, but he has experience for the last year or so in San Francisco. So we have the first question from Brianna. She's not here right now, but so she wanted to hear a little more in detail about your work experience both of you had prior to relocating to the West Coast.
Yeah, I guess I'll start. So yeah, I've wrapped up my grant year summer 2015, like July, and was thinking about where do I go next. And in college, I'd done some internships in tech. So I worked at HP one summer, and then I worked at a startup in San Francisco another summer. So that's kind of where I wanted to be after my Fulbright. And the way I thought, if you want to work in tech, you want to be in San Francisco, right? So I literally just, packed up all my bags, moved to San Francisco, and, was able to find housing through friends on Facebook, and ended up just spending August of 2015 just interviewing at a lot of places. And there's a variety of ways where you can get interviews, right? You can reach out to your alumni network. You can, go on LinkedIn and maybe find some Fulbright alumni through that network. And there's also a couple different job platforms like hired.com, and LinkedIn will have jobs on it. So there's a variety of ways where you can start to apply for jobs. And because I wasn't working, I had all day, every day just to take an interview. I'd go on site and meet with people, and that ended up working out. Where obviously it's kind of a shotgun approach. I just was interviewing for like tech sales jobs everywhere, and ended up having a few different options at the end of the month, and started working at MuleSoft, which is an enterprise software company, in September. So that was kind of, I'm happy to walk through maybe some in depth more about what that interview process looked like, but I think, and also what the decision process looked like in terms of deciding why MuleSoft versus other companies. But that's where I've been for the past almost 2 years. So I've been in sales at MuleSoft. Just moved to New York because we're building out our office here, and it's an exciting time for the company, exciting city, as Esther knows. But yeah, let's start with that. Esther, why don't you tell us how you got to where you're at?
Sure. So after the Fulbright, I was set on going to grad school. And so I had put in my application and I said, okay, well, what am I going to do for the year leading up or the few months leading up to my semester starting? And so, the hook here, similar to Karl, is the internship piece. I had interned at Bloomberg during undergrad. So, power of relationships and going and reaching back out to my former manager and saying, listen, I'm coming back from this incredible opportunity and I'm looking for a full-time gig. Are there opportunities? And at that point, I wasn't sure if I was going to go into corporate, nonprofit, or government. So I did explore a number of different options, but long story short, I ended up back at Bloomberg, where I worked in Bloomberg Tech. So what that meant was I worked for the HR team supporting all of our technical engineers. And at that time, the big thing was we kept like trying to figure out, like, how do we retain the best technical talent? Because we kept losing. What happens in the tech space is it's a competition. So people either want to go to investment banks where they make a lot of money, or go to the creative space, which is all the tech companies. So we started doing a lot of cool talent and culture programs there. And that's really what sparked my career in diversity and inclusion, which is the focus that I do. So I focus specifically on how do you build diverse and inclusive teams in different organizations. So after I did that, transitioned to a full-time diversity role at Moody's, where I led our global diversity programs, and Moody's is another financial services company. And at Moody's specifically, I also covered our San Francisco office. So I used to come out here often. And the biggest aha for me was, hold on a second, New York culture is so different from San Francisco. So in New York, for example, we have business formal. Then I would come to California and everyone's wearing jeans. And I'm thinking, hold on a second, the market is different. Our communities are different. The way we recruit and retain folks is different. So it was a big learning for me. And fast forward, I'll say, the work in diversity and inclusion, especially now more than ever, is super important. And I was thinking, how do I make an impact in an organization that really that's doing a lot more with diversity and inclusion? Finance and education, they've been talking about diversity for a number of years, 20 plus years. Tech is at the early stages. Many of these companies are new. So just to fast forward, I had thought about coming to Google for a number of years, and finally the right opportunity came, and I moved here about a year ago. So I am on the diversity and inclusion team for Google. So what that means is I serve as an internal consultant for anything and everything related to diversity. So that could be around our manager strategies, that could be around our product launches as we go live with different things. How do we make sure we're building for all users? We know that the next billion users are not going to be white male engineers from Mountain View. That's not what our users, that's not just what our users look like. So it's been a really cool experience, and I'll stop right here.
That's interesting, Esther, that you mentioned that financial services was a little more forward thinking in diversity and inclusion relative to tech. That's actually pretty surprising to me. Do you want to comment on, the difference between the two industries?
Sure. It's really because the diversity and inclusion function historically came from compliance, meaning everyone wanted to do the right thing. Nobody wants to get in trouble. Everybody was like, oh my goodness, what do I say? What do I do? How do I do X, Y, Z? So, but finance early, about like 15, 20 years ago, started realizing, hold on a second, this isn't about compliance, it's about talent. And like, that's exactly how I define diversity and inclusion. It's about how do you get the best people in your teams, period. But hiring is only half of the equation. You can bring in, also think about it from a Fulbright experience. We bring in the best people for Fulbright Korea, but if we can't retain them, if the folks who are in Korea aren't happy or don't feel engaged, don't feel supported, don't feel valued, then we miss out. So really my job, I'm not a recruiter. I don't recruit or hire folks. Once employees come through the door, how do I work with managers to make sure that they are responsible for the culture they create and the team norms they create? And then also from an individual perspective, like how do we make sure from a day-to-day perspective that we all contribute and make all of our experience enjoyable and more exciting to come to work. And I would say, just to add one more piece, Karl, I think a lot of it is just new processes and policies. So a lot of tech organizations are new or are still in startup mode from a HR perspective or a people perspective. They've been historically so focused on like process, like let's get the product out. And now they're realizing, oh wait, we need to do career development and we need a process in place and we need, all these other things that come together.
Yeah, it's interesting too when you put a bunch of white male engineers in the room, they're going to have probably more of an algorithmic approach to hiring. I know Google was famous for that originally, right? Like it seemed like they were able to crunch all these numbers and figure out like what the perfect candidate looked like. It is interesting to think about, because I know it's something, especially in enterprise software, which is a lot more stiff and buttoned up and traditionally white. It's harder on the hiring side to get diverse talent. I know, it's not really my world as much, but it's something that comes up a lot even at MuleSoft. Maybe Esther, would that on the hiring and I guess you're more like onboarding and thinking about career development, but what are some ways that like Fulbrighters can maybe leverage that to their advantage when they're looking for jobs in tech?
Sure. So is your question, and I'm gonna answer that question with the question that Michael had, which was around, I think there were a few questions, Michael, around how do you position?
Yeah, and how do you position yourself? So someone asked about not having a strong background in tech. So like, how do you market yourself, position yourself to get a job in the tech industry?
I want to be super clear. I have zero experience in computer science or STEM. That's not what I studied. I studied cultural anthropology and sociology. And so I want to be very clear that you don't need a technical or computer science education to get into this work. And I will also share, there is no traditional path. Like everyone says, well, what's the one way to do it? There's no such thing as one way to do it. In terms of what to position, I would say a few things. One, the work that I do is around culture. And you all are culture agents. You left your homes, your families, your communities, and you went to a whole nother country, unless, I'm mistaken. I don't know, maybe you all are Korean and I just don't know it. But I think that's huge. That speaks to your character, that speaks to your work ethic, that speaks to your leadership style, your life perspective, and all of that. And all of your lived experiences in Korea have contributed to your toolbox and your identity and your leadership. So I would say one that's huge in terms of the intercultural experience, being able to work with people who are different from you, being planted in a whole different setting and learning how to be super scrappy and learn how to, just roll up your sleeves and have a structure, but also like go pick it up as you go and go with the flow. Two, I would say problem solving. You all are doing incredible work and transforming communities and families and students and thinking about and really delivering meaningful work. And like whenever I think of an ideal teammate, I want someone who's a really strong problem solver. Like there's so many gaps and issues and things like that, but our end goal is how do we work together to drive success? And the third piece I will say is from a STEM perspective, for me, education is key. I think education is one of the biggest equalizers, whether it's science education, technology education, whether it's diversity and inclusion education. You don't know what you don't know, and you all are educators. And the fact that you are committed to your own learning but also the learning of others, I think is super invaluable. Karl, what about your thoughts? Anything else you want to?
Yeah, I mean, it depends what you're trying to get into, right? But it also, I would absolutely echo Esther's points. It's like, at least for me, I didn't focus as much on the teaching element. It was more like, hey, like I spent a year in Korea in the countryside, and that demonstrates my appetite for risk, my ability to throw me into any situation. I'm going to figure it out, and also, yeah, like adaptability. All these different things where you can position those as skills, demonstrated skills that you're going to bring when, throw me into this company setting and I'm going to figure it out, right? And I'm scrappy. I'm not, similar to what Esther said. Maybe actually can we open it up quickly? I'm curious, since we don't have, it's a handful of people in line, maybe, Talia, Nikki, Michael, Brittany, you guys can share a little bit about why you're thinking about tech and what you're hoping to do, or maybe you don't know, and that's okay. We can help kind of frame what that looks like. And sorry, my light keeps turning off. Talia, why don't we start with you?
Sure, yeah. So I don't really have any background in tech. I was a government major in college, but my dad's a physicist, and I think there's always kind of been this influence in my background where I've always been interested in science, but I've never really felt like I knew where to engage with it. But I'm also really interested in social justice issues, and next year I'm taking a job in New York City that has to do with education, and I kind of want to continue doing something with that, but I'm also kind of feel like I'm missing a part of my life that has to do with STEM. So I want to kind of intertwine those two together in some way, but I haven't really figured out how I'm going to do that yet.
Nice. Where will you be working in New York, and how'd you get that job?
So I took a fellowship with Avodah, which is the Jewish Service Corps, and I'll be working at a day and night school in Manhattan. And that's the population there is like older students, so it's a lot of immigrant students, and a lot of students have dropped out of other high schools, but I'll be a college and career counselor at that school next year.
Great, congratulations.
Thank you.
Nikki, why don't you go next?
All right. Well, I also have very little background in technology. I studied history and Asian studies, and then I went on to get my master's of international studies at the University of Washington. And then after that, I came to Fulbright. So my background is primarily within the realm of cultural studies, within international relations and intercultural communication. So for me, though, I'm really big on diversity and cross-cultural communication. So when you talk about the tech field, this is a field that it is the future, especially for the United States. It's one of our biggest places of competition, and the need for diversity is so important, especially I think as we're facing a lot of very different political situations in the US, the conversation of diversity has become even more paramount than it was years ago. So that's why I'm really interested in intercultural and bringing in diversity and into the tech field.
Great. Michael?
Yeah, I can go next. I don't know if I see myself working in tech in the future. I don't have a strong interest. I think for me, I'm a little more interested possibly relocating to the West Coast. Not sure exactly what I'll be doing in the future. But in college, I did work as a help desk at the help desk with computers and stuff. So I had a little bit of experience with working with computers, solving those problems. So a little bit.
Well, what do you want to do? Or do you know?
That's a good question. Not sure exactly. So maybe teaching. So I went to grad school and did elementary education. So I got my master's in teaching. So maybe teaching, but I'm not honestly 100% sure. Still trying to figure that out. So, yeah.
Last but not least, Brittany.
Oh, hi. Okay, can you hear me? Sorry, I'm still really not used to this Google Hangout thing.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So I also have absolutely no background in technology. I have a undergraduate degree in biology, and I think the position that I found myself in after my first year here abroad is that I'm trying to figure out exactly what it is that I want to do with my degree. I kind of didn't have a really good ending to my academic career in terms of research. And so I kind of had this plan laid out for myself. And I thought I was going to go from A to B to C to get my master's degree in research and go on from there and get a PhD. But I'm kind of in this position where I'm questioning whether or not that is what I want to do. And so I've also always been surrounded by people who are in the tech industry. Many of my closest friends were computer science majors. I actually have a couple friends who work on the West Coast, and I actually have one friend who's working at Google right now. And so I just kind of wanted to like see my options and kind of see what's out there right now. But I also am trying to figure out how I can possibly use my degree and apply it to some type of future technical career at this point. I'm still trying to figure out exactly what it is that I want to do after my Fulbright year.
Great. Yeah, it's interesting. You know, a lot of you said, you know, I don't have a background in tech, right? And I think one thing that I would encourage you all to do is just look back at your body of work. So think about all of your experiences as an undergrad. Maybe that's your, you know, academic focus. So your major, maybe that's, you know, your internships in whatever industry or role that you were doing them in. And think about, you know, try to dissect like which skills you actually learn in those experiences, and then focus more on those skills or that aptitude rather than, you know, than industry specific skills, right? So it's like, hey, like, you know, I studied history in college, and that gave me the skill of like doing lots of or distilling a lot of information and you know, coming up with arguments and like really becoming good at writing. And then, you know, I spent a year in Korea, and like I needed like all these adaptability skills. So think about like not just like necessarily like directly translatable, like, oh, I worked in tech sales, so now I need to find another job in tech sales. Or, you know, I worked in teaching, now I want to find another job in teaching. But more like, what are some like core skills that can apply to almost any job or any industry, and how can I translate that? And that can be helpful like just in any interview, right? It's like you just got to think about like how you're framing what you did.
I'll just
Karl,
add that. Go ahead, Michael.
Sorry. I just had a question about interviews for you. So like, what are some questions maybe in these tech interviews that they asked about like your time in Korea, how like it would apply and stuff like that? Curious.
I'm going to zoom out and say, I'll answer that in 1 second, Michael. I will say just to add to Karl's point, I think it's also important, you know, one of the coolest things about working in tech for me personally, and when I say tech, meaning whether it's financial tech or it doesn't matter what aspect of tech, is just how diverse people's backgrounds have been and are. So when I sit on my team, I have folks with policy and history and arts and humanities. I have folks that are artists, and I have people who were educators in their past life. So I just want to like take a moment and recognize you all have incredible backgrounds and are like super, super rock stars. And so when I speak with folks who are saying, well, you know, I don't have XYZ, like, don't even worry about that. So I want to say that. To answer your specific question, Michael, I will say the biggest questions that folks will ask is around whether it's tech or wherever you're interviewing, is just how has your past experience influenced your perspective? What have you learned? Tell me about a time where you've worked on a team. Like, tell me about a time when you've seen a product or project through completion. So as you all think about like an idea that you built during your Fulbright, you know, and I always say, use the STAR model. So what was the situation or task? What was the action? And then most importantly, what was the result? Whether it was good or bad, that doesn't matter. The thing that folks want to hear is, how do you think through problems, and how can you tell your journey, because folks are not mind readers. So just being able to kind of show and display the work that you've done and the work that you've done to make an impact. I know we're at the 30-minute mark, and Michael, I know you've collected a lot of awesome questions. I also want to make sure that the folks on the call also have a chance to chime in.
Definitely, I agree. If anyone wants to come in at any point, add anything at the moment. If not, we can shift. I'm curious, kind of shifting a little bit. So how was it? We had someone ask a question, Brittany, Talia, and Nikki, like a combination of readjustment. So after your year in Korea, how was it like? What was maybe the biggest difficulties for you, challenges you faced, and what was that like? How'd you overcome them?
I'm happy to go first. I'll say personally, the struggle with entering, returning from any international experience, and I studied abroad in college, was the experience that I just had this life-changing, transformative experience, and everyone around me, like I just felt like I had to condense everything and summarize everything in 5 minutes. So everyone would say, "Oh, how was it?" And you're like, "Good," or "How was it?" And so I'm like, hold on a second. Like, how do I go about talking about my experience? So personally, it was a really big struggle when you've had this incredible experience and you now have to, whether it's in an interview, whether it's on a one-on-one, when you're catching up with friends, family, it doesn't matter. But I think the big question is like, how do you process everything you've experienced? Professionally, it was really difficult going from a super creative environment. When I was on a Fulbright and I had this research grant, I was able to call my own shots. I can design my own day. I had a lot of autonomy and independence. And then I shifted to a work environment where I was part of a system and a process, and I had a schedule, and that was a really big culture shift for me in terms of having to not being able to drive a lot of my day-to-day. And so I think in terms of also feeling like, how do I get energized by my work? Because as much as there's really cool fun stuff, there's a lot of also administrative things that come into play. So about how do you balance your job? Karl, what about you?
Yeah, those are really good points. Yeah, it's funny. I feel like I've had and I think we can all relate to this. Like, we've all had moments of big change and adjustment and relocation just by virtue of going to Korea, right? It's probably similar to like, you first land in Korea. It's like pretty eye-opening, and how do you even process that, right? And it's similar like if you went to college out of state like I did, or if you studied abroad like Esther did, and I'm sure a lot of us did, right? And there's different periods of, you just get a lot of feelings, right? When you move there and when you come back, and it is a big adjustment. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't really want to hear about it, right? And no one's going to hold your hand either. So I think that can be hard. And I think the best way to go about it, at least for me, was reaching out and staying in contact with some of my really close Fulbright friends who also moved back, and I'd call them up and we'd talk about it. One of them happened to be in San Francisco, so we'd meet up, and that was a really good outlet for me where I could just talk really freely and talk with someone who not only wants to hear about the adjustment, but is also going through it themselves, and they were in Korea too, in the same experience. And I think that was really important to me in that time. I'll leave it at that. Just stay in contact with your close friends, talk with your family. It's similar things with any adjustment, but I think especially international relocation.
Can I just jump in with a kind of follow-up question in here?
Yeah.
I'm curious, you kind of touched on it a little bit, but how you are still like staying connected to your experience in Korea. Like, are you doing anything that you kind of wouldn't have probably been doing if you hadn't spent all this time here?
Yeah, I guess I'll start. So one thing that was really important to me in Korea was writing. So I wrote a lot of like Medium articles about different experiences. So it wasn't quite a blog, but it was similar. So that was really important to me, and it was important when I came back too. So I like randomly wrote about a Korean film director that I got really into, Hong Sang-soo, and I wrote that from San Francisco. And you can go to the occasional Korean restaurant. To be honest, like, I haven't kept up with it as much. I feel like I kind of closed that chapter of my life, which is kind of sad. Like, I was at one point I could speak a little bit of Korean, and now it's terrible. Esther, I'm curious, what have you done to keep up with Korea?
So I would say, my passion is diversity and inclusion, and it's also the arts. And so when I got back, I did a lot of work locally in the community around, working with Korean artists and working with different dance programs. So I haven't really found my community here yet in San Francisco, but I've been really lucky that my dance research team and teachers from Korea all actually came to the States to visit at some point in the last few years. So that's been nice. On a social perspective, socially, I would say two of my closest friends are Fulbright friends, actually not even from my Fulbright cohort. They were ETAs a year before or after me. So I will say a lot of it is also like just the power of the Fulbright, the broader Fulbright community, and also being in touch with people who didn't even do Fulbright in Korea, but just like through friends of friends of friends who you have this like shared experience and common bond. So I would say just meeting really great people, especially with my move here, that have kept me grounded.
Sorry, I'm receiving a lot of Ria during the phone call from my host brother. But thank you for your answers. Those are really helpful. Kind of can you compare, I think, the difference between like the West Coast and the East Coast in terms of like being engaged with Korean culture?
Why don't you start us off, Esther?
Ooh, being engaged with Korean culture. Well, let me take a zoom out. I would say East and West Coast for me culturally have been like fascinating. I am totally an East Coaster. I like the East Coast pace. I like transportation and access, and there's so many things about the East Coast that I crave. I've also come to like really appreciate the lifestyle on the West Coast and just like the quality of life here. In terms of your specific question, Talia, around Korean culture, I've been really disappointed. There's very little Korean food here. I know LA and like Seattle, amazing. In San Francisco, I haven't even been able to find one good Korean restaurant. So I'll leave it at that. Karl, what about you?
That's important news.
Not much. I would totally agree. I think quality of life in California is so nice. Like the weather's perfect. Like it's, people are more laid back. And that vibe with me really well. It's really nice, right? It is expensive, but it's nice. New York, I'm just getting used to, so I won't comment on it too much. But like, yeah, for example, New York City has K-Town, right? And you go over to Jersey, there's like Foster City, or there's some like Korean city there. It's like everything's in Korean, right? And there's just a lot of different pockets in New York that are, that have like really strong ethnic ties, if I can say that. So like K-Town, and in San Francisco, there's kind of a clustering of Koreans in like Sunnyvale area, and there's some good Korean restaurants down there. But in the city itself, there's hardly anything. There's a Japantown, and there's one decent restaurant. Esther, you should check out Hanil Kwan in the Richmond. Hanil Kwan, it's pretty good. But there's not much there. But I don't know. It's you got to search for it. Like I went to a screening of a Hong Sang-soo film like 2 weeks ago in San Francisco, which is part of the San Francisco International Film Festival. So there are little things like that you can kind of engage with. But
Great, awesome. Thank you, guys.
Nice. So yeah, we'll continue to just open it up here. I think we touched a lot on the questions for the most part. I kind of have a specific question in regards to living arrangement housing. How did you guys set that up, and what I know, Karl, you're on the East Coast now, but when you were in San Francisco, and Esther too, how'd you guys set that up, and was your commute like too?
Yeah, housing's tough. I mean, if you're living in New York or San Francisco, it's gonna be pricey. I've found that New York is much less expensive than San Francisco, surprisingly. I don't know if Esther, you found something similar, but if you want to live in an urban center, it's going to be pricey. You're just going to pay that premium. And what I did was I immediately posted on Facebook, like, hey friends, I'm moving to San Francisco. Anyone have any housing leads? And typically like the people living there they'll ask a friend or they'll hear, but like, there's a really strong network effect where it's like, hey, like what's going on? But then there's also regional differences where like in San Francisco, so if you're moving there, most of housing is done through Craigslist. And you kind of got to be there in person. So you really need a place to crash for like a week or two, ideally, and look for housing. You just have to scour Craigslist every day and just go to open houses and try to meet with landlords. And it seems a little sketchy, but that's just how it's done. in New York, it's much different. You typically go through a broker and you pay them a premium, but they will find you a couple of different options. They'll take you on kind of a super day where they take you all these different places. And thankfully, the space is getting a little disrupted. So there's something called StreetEasy.com where you can look for apartments, at least in New York. And I don't know if it's in San Francisco yet, but there are different options like that. But I would say like find a place to crash for a week or two and then look for it while you're on the ground, because it's really hard to look for housing and jobs, to be honest, if you're remote.
Housing is really tough in San Francisco. I will say it's the most expensive city I've ever lived in. People always say, oh, how does it compare to New York? And I'm like, it's a lot more expensive. So I will say that, and especially coming after a fellowship, or anything non-San Francisco beforehand, I think it was a really big adjustment. In terms of housing, I actually did, my situation was a little bit different because I got a lot of support in terms of relocating with my company, but taking the job in California. I've always been a California employee. And so for me, taking this job meant I would have to move out here. I actually lived in 4 different cities or areas within the first 4 months because I was commuting back and forth between headquarters and San Francisco. So initially I lived in the South Bay, so in the Palo Alto area, and then I moved back up to San Francisco, then I moved back down, and then moved back up. So I will say the commute is a real thing. Even if you live and work in San Francisco, like my official desk is in San Francisco, it's still a 40-minute commute for me to get to my desk. And then when I commute to headquarters, it's about, sometimes I'm stuck for 2.5 hours each way. So I will say there is always something that you have to compromise. In terms of my neighborhood, I chose a pretty residential neighborhood, and it's for me, like I'm not next to a subway, but I really like the location, and it was the first thing I found. The landlord happened to be from New York City, so it was an easy one for me. But I will say there's always a trade-off.
Where are you living at?
In the Russian Hill area.
Oh, nice.
Russian Hill area.
Yeah, that's a really nice area.
I have a question for the two of you. So, Karl, you mentioned that you just up and moved to San Francisco. And for many people, that is not a reality, especially coming back from the Fulbright, that we can just get up and move to a very expensive city.
Why not? Just the money?
Just the money, yeah. The money alone is a big barrier for many people, especially if you have other bills that you're paying in the States and other stuff like that. But one question I did have was, how did relocation work out with you? I know, Karl, that you already had a pre-established position in MuleSoft and you moved, correct?
When I moved to New York, yeah.
To New York, right. But
Yeah.
one of the bigger questions that I've had is, finding a job and, how will I move to a big city with what, I guess that's kind of my question. Like, how much moving costs would you say set aside and all of that stuff?
Yeah, I totally hear you. It's risky, right? And it's a financial risk, right? So I would say don't just move somewhere. You have to have a plan, right? And in my case, I was able to, before I bought my plane ticket, find a friend's couch to crash on. So I knew I had a place to crash for at least a week, maybe 2, right? And that's free, right? So it's no money. And then in terms of like food, that's gonna be your biggest cost, but you can actually make that, relatively inexpensive if you just don't eat that much, you just eat cheap food, right? It's not the best idea, but not the best scenario, but you can do it, right? And then, so and since Fulbright is paying for your plane ticket, like that cost is taken care of. So I think it actually can be done relatively inexpensively, but you gotta have a plan, right? So not only to plan to get there and to where you're gonna be for the first 2 weeks, but also plan during that time. Like you need to know exactly what type of jobs and things that you'll be looking for, because as soon as you land, there's a gun to your head saying, you know, if I don't have, like, I moved to San Francisco, right, and it ended up working out, but like, there was a gun in my head that entire first month, because it was like, if I don't find a job, I don't know what I'm going to do. I can't stay here for more than a month, right? That was how much money I had based on how much I saved during my Fulbright year. And so it's like, I gunned to my head, if I don't find a job after a month, I have to go home to Idaho. And that was, you know, obviously added a lot of pressure to really hustle and interview all the time.
I do want to add, you know, for me, the financials is a real thing, and I'm first generation college student and first generation corporate. So I will say, like, the financials is something that people do not talk about, and San Francisco is no joke. 3 years ago, when I got the offer to initially come to Google, I had to decline that because financially I couldn't make it work. And so I will say, you know, one thing that could help is also just starting the process and just knowing, because it's hard to anecdotally know how much things cost. Once you start the conversation and once you start exploring, you can kind of gauge, you know, how much do things cost? Like, what could a potential salary or package look like? So I will say, all the questions that you all are asking and thinking about is valid and definitely real. So I really appreciate that, and thanks, Karl, for your. I completely agree with everything you shared.
Okay. Anyone else have any further questions? Okay. Well, then I think then we'll call it a day. Well, a night here. Day for you guys.
What time is it over there?
Almost, it's past 11:12. So.
Wow. Okay. I appreciate you
but
guys.
we got a holiday tomorrow, so that's nice.
Wait, like 5-day weekend?
Yeah, big 5-day weekend.
Oh,
so.
that's
Good
awesome.
all the time.
Yeah. So, but
where's our 5-day weekend in the States?
Yeah. Yeah. I guess you guys both have to work.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you for joining. I really appreciate it, both of you, Esther and Karl.
Yeah, we can close out. Michael, thanks for setting this up. Actually, just real quickly, I don't know if you know John Schmalley, but I think he was one of the first people to set up this kind of like alumni hangout thing in my year, and it was really well done. I remember being in your shoes, attending some of these, and I always really enjoyed them.
I think we've had like 5 or so this year, 3 to 5. They've been really great. So.
Nice. Yeah, I know it's a lot of work to set it up, just get in contact with people, figure out schedules, timelines. So good work there. But yeah, everyone, it was really nice to meet you all. And you know, I am in New York now, but I do have some experience in San Francisco. You know, so if you have any questions about, you know, moving there, getting around the cities like New York or SF, and just looking for jobs or whatever, feel free to shoot me an email. I don't know if Michael, if you can send my email, my contact.
I can send the email. And, is your couch available if I need New York City if I go?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, if you're willing to stay in Bushwick, in Brooklyn. But yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, cool. Seriously, if you need a couch to sleep on, I think we can make it work for at least a week. My roommate's mad, but.
As a resource, I don't have a lot of space, but I think we're all. But yes, you know, definitely reach out. And I just want to share, you know, this is a super exciting time. You all are trying to figure out what your next chapter is going to look like. And I used to say, like, what's the right decision? Like, that's something that I grappled with. There's no such thing as a right decision. You make a decision and you make it right for you. So I'm really, really pumped to hear what your next journey and chapter is going to look like. If you have any questions, you know, happy to please stay in touch and keep us posted on what you decide.
Definitely.
Thank you so much, Michael, and thank you, Karl, for making this happen. And thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
So much.
Great. We'll sign out. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.